morning, and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim. Let's continue our journey with Christian and hopeful. I think last week I said our journey was with Christian and faithful, which it had been earlier in the story, but now it's Christian and hopeful. So let's continue with chapter 12, part 5, A View of the City. By this time, Christian and hopeful had a desire to go forward in their pilgrimage, and the shepherds also desired this for them. So they walked together toward the end of the mountains. Then the shepherds said to one another, "Let us show the pilgrims the gates of the celestial city from here. That is, if they have the skill to look through our perspective glass." So they led them to the top of a high hill called Clear, and offered the glass to them. The pilgrims gladly accepted it, and both attempted to see through it. Because of the memory of the last thing that had been shown to them, however, their hands were shaking. Though they were unable to have a clear and steady gaze through the glass, they did think they saw something like the gate and perhaps even some of the glory of the city. After this they began to descend the hill, and the pilgrims sang this song: "Thus by the shepherds secrets are revealed, which from other men are kept quite concealed. Come to the shepherds then, if you would see things deep, things hid, that mystery be." When they were about to resume the pilgrimage, one of the shepherds gave them written instructions to guide them on their way. Another told them to beware of the flatterer. A third told them to be careful not to sleep on the enchanted ground. Then the fourth wished them God's blessing on the journey. So then I awoke from my dream. Chapter 13, Part 1. Walking with Ignorance. I again fell asleep and had a dream. I saw the same two pilgrims going down the mountains along the highway toward the city. Now a little beyond these mountains, on the left hand, lay the country of Conceit. A little crooked lane came from that country and joined the way in which the pilgrims were walking. At that junction they met a very lively young man from that country whose name was Ignorance. And Christian asked him where he came from and where he was going. He replied, "Sir, I was born in that country that lies over there, a little to the left, and I am going to the celestial city." "But how do you think you will get in at the gate?" asked Christian. "You may find some difficulty there." "I will get in as other good people do." "But what do you have to show at the gate so that it may be opened for you?" "I know my Lord's will and have lived a good life. I pay back every debt. I pray and fast. I pay tithes and give to charities, and I have left my country behind in order to reach my destination." "But you didn't come in at the wicket gate. That is at the beginning of this way. You came in here through this crooked lane. I fear that in spite of how you may see yourself, when the day of reckoning comes, you will be counted as a thief and robber, and will not gain entrance into the city." "Gentlemen, you are absolute strangers to me. I don't know you. Please be content to follow the doctrine of your country, and I will be content to follow the doctrine of mine. I wish you well, but as for the wicket gate you mention, all the world knows that it is a long way from our country. I don't think a single person in our whole region even knows the way to get to it. Nor do they need to worry about whether they do or not, since we have, as you can see, a fine, pleasant green lane that comes down from our country to the way." When Christian saw that the man relied on the wisdom of his own conceit, he whispered to Hopeful, "Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. Even as he walks along the road, the fool lacks sense and shows everyone how stupid he is." Then he asked, "What do you think? Shall we talk further with him, or go ahead of him for a while and leave him to think about what he has already heard? We could stop and wait for him later and see if, by correcting him a little at the time, we can do him any good." Then Hopeful said, "Let Ignorance for a while muse on what's been said, and let him not refuse to embrace good counsel, lest he remain still ignorant of what's the greatest gain. God says of them who discernment have waived, He's their maker, but they will not be saved." Hopeful added, "I don't think it will be good for us to say too much to him all at once. If it is all right with you, let us pass him for now, and talk with him another time when he is open to it. So they both went ahead of ignorance. Chapter 13, Part 2. A Man Being Carried Away. They had not gone far when they entered a very dark lane, where they saw a man whom 7 demons had bound with 7 strong cords. The demons were carrying him back to the door on the side of the hill that the pilgrims had been shown earlier. Trembling, Christian attempted to see if he knew him, and it looked like it might be Turnaway, who lived in the town of Apostasy. He couldn't see the face clearly, however, because he was hanging his head like a captured thief. But after they had gone by, Hopeful saw a sign on his back with these words, Self-indulgent Professor and Damnable Apostate. Chapter 13, Part 3. The Story of Little Faith. Then Christian said to his companion, Now I remember that someone told me about a thing that happened to a good man in these parts. The name of the man was Little Faith, but he was a good man and lived in the town of Sincere. As I recall, the story goes like this. At the entrance of this passage, there comes down from the broad way a lane called Dead Man's Lane. It is called this because of the murderers that commonly take place there. This man, Little Faith, was going on a pilgrimage, as we are, and he happened to sit down there and sleep. Now at that time, 3 big bruisers were coming down the lane from the Broadway gate. Their names were Faintheart, Mistrust, and Guilt, 3 brothers. They saw Little Faith, who had just awakened and was getting ready to resume his journey, when they came racing up to him. Approaching him with threatening language, they told him to stand up. At this, Little Faith turned as white as a sheet, and he had no strength either to run or fight. Then Faintheart said to him, Give us your wallet. But being reluctant to turn over his money, he moved too slowly. Mistrust therefore ran up to him and, thrusting his hand into Little Faith's pocket, pulled out his wallet and grabbed his money. Little Faith cried out, Thieves! Thieves! With that, Guilt struck Little Faith on the head with a large club that he had in his hand. Little Faith fell flat on the ground. There he lay, bleeding profusely and looking as though he might bleed to death. All this time the thieves just stood there, but then they heard someone coming up the road. They feared that it might be Great Grace from the City of Good Confidence, so they took off running and left Little Faith there to fend for himself. Somehow he got up and managed to go on his way. This was the story I heard. But did they take from him everything he owned? Asked Hopeful. No, he had his jewels hidden, so he was able to keep them. But I was told that he was very upset over his loss because the thieves had gotten most of his spending money. He had a little bit of money left, but not enough to bring him to his journey's end. No, if I am not misinformed, just to keep himself alive, he was forced to beg as he journeyed along, for he refused to sell his jewels. And in spite of begging and doing what he could to scrape by, he went hungry most of the rest of the way. But isn't it a marvel that they didn't get his certificate for admittance to the Celestial Gate? Asked Hopeful. Yes, it is a marvel. They didn't miss it because of any cunning on his part. He was so unnerved at their coming that he had neither power nor skill to hide anything. It was the providence of God more than his own endeavor that saved the certificate. It must be of great comfort to him that they didn't get his jewels from him, said Hopeful. It might have been of great comfort to him if he had used it as he should have, but those who told me the story said that he made little use of it all the rest of the way because of the dismay he felt over the loss of his money. He even forgot about it for the better part of the rest of the journey. Besides this, whenever he thought of it, and he began to be comforted, fresh thoughts of his loss would come to his mind, and he would once again be overwhelmed. Oh, the poor man! This must have caused him great grief, said Hopeful. Grief? Yes, grief indeed. This would have been a case for any of us had we been so cruelly robbed and wounded in a strange place. Poor soul, it is a wonder he didn't die with grief. I was told that he spent most of his remaining time on the way mourning and complaining bitterly, telling all those he met where the robbery had happened and how it occurred, and who had done it, what was lost, how he was wounded, and how he had barely escaped with his life. And we'll stop there for this week and pick up next week with Chapter 13, Part 4, Hopeful Misjudges Little Faith. hopefully we'll learn a new lesson there. Until next week, we will see you on Friday, hopefully, for our Friday video. But until next Tuesday, take care, stay safe, and God bless.